and welcome to Mastery Muse. Today I want to talk about ADDIE. ADDIE is a model to design learning processes. It's used in organizations, so if you want to become a trainer or a learning designer, you would probably need to know this model. But I also want to share it because lots of us adults, we don't have the flexibility to go to university and dedicate so much time to learn something. So very often we need to be in charge of our own learning processes. But we never had to think about how to do it and why, because always somebody else, like a learning designer or a trainer, did it for us. So I want to give you this process to help you also reflect and plan your own mastery development. Let's get started. First, let me tell you what these letters stand for. A, analysis, D, design, development, implementation, evaluation. This is the round process of learning design, whether it's a leadership development training or an e-learning course. I'm gonna explain one by one and then give you some examples. So A is analysis. It includes looking at the learners mainly, who's gonna be in this training or who's gonna do this e-learning course, and looking at what skills and behaviors do they already have and which would they need to have to reach some specific business goals, for example. This is analysis. It's a big, long, important process. It shouldn't be skipped. Also part of analysis is to decide what type of training would be the right solution to the business need, for example, or individual need. And it could be that training is not a good solution. That's sometimes being forgotten. D stands for design. Once we know all the needs, we can start thinking about the design of the format and how the training itself would look like. You could think about it as a sort of a briefing in a way. So you would need to know what topics to include, what information, what order, what's the time frame, and so on, all the logistics about the course. It includes information like pedagogical approach, if the course should take place online or should it be offline or is it blended mode, what is the cadence, the frequency, what is the duration of it, what kind of materials will be needed. The next D is development. So once you know all the things that need to be designed, if it's an online training or offline, you can move to the design phase. Maybe you will need some interactive or VR or AR learning interventions. Maybe you will just need a presentation. Maybe you will need exercises and you need to design specific interactions to take place in a room itself for in-person training. Or a combination of both in case of blended learning approaches. So blended, remember, combining online and offline methods. Implementation is of course, implementing it. It's very specific for instructional design on online platform. You can think of just pretty much making this training accessible to the users. It could mean adding it to the e-learning platform. It could be hosting the training, sending the invitations, and actually giving the training. And the E stands for evaluation, which means you need to also look back and see if actually everything that you did helped to address the needs that came out through the analysis, through the first step. So this is the whole round process, and you can think of it as a guide for project management when it comes to learning design projects. You need to go through all the steps. One thing to keep in mind, based from my own experience, it's very rarely a linear process. And I will never start designing until I would have thought about evaluation. I think this is one of the very basic mistakes that people do. They start analyzing, they start developing something, but also they didn't think about how to evaluate it. And for evaluation, the important thing to keep in mind is not to create some weird, crazy test like we have often at universities. You study something, there is a purpose of you being able to know this knowledge and use it and apply it. And the test is just some random questions that somebody came up with without even thinking whether they are relevant for whatever you're going to do with this information. But it's about measuring if you actually paid attention, which is, if the course is good, you don't need to measure that. So that's my approach, at least. This is the model, and now I'd like to give you an example of how to use it in corporation. One specific example I'm going to use from Toastmasters. It's not a corporation, actually, it's a non-profit organization, but it's very similar structures. And the other one, I want to give it on more individual, personal level. I'll give you a concept from my own Portuguese language learning. Let's look at an organizational example from Toastmasters. One of my roles in Toastmasters is to lead Mentoring Academy in Innsbruck. And in this role, I organized also a Mentoring Academy training with other club members, with our past president. It was really a lot of fun, but my process was exactly this. First of all, I asked myself who is still in the Mentoring Academy and what skills would they need to have in order to be able to be good mentors. This was my very first question. And one thing I realized that would be great to know is how to help other people set goals and use coaching approaches to help others reflect about them and how they want to develop. Additional requirement for mentors is to know exactly how the pathways, the e-learning or like the curricula at Toastmasters are structured, because mentors guide the new members through the first levels of that learning journey. So these were two important needs that emerged through the analysis. Then, once I knew this, that came the design, which was putting the agenda. It was the online training of 2 hours, and we split the timings based on the amount of information that we collected that would be important to convey in order to actually give this training and fulfill this need. This was the design. Then the development was preparation of the actual presentation, dividing the roles with another moderator, discussing how we're gonna proceed, when we need breakout rooms, when people work together, when we are giving a lecture and making the transitions between all these other formats. Then, of course, the users, I'm biased by my work, UX, user design, and so on. Anyway, then we move to I, which is when the participants are being invited, they participate in the training, they get all this knowledge, and then we evaluate. So at the end of the training, we ask for reflection sharing in the room, what was useful, what was not useful. We follow up with people. Sometimes if there is time, we also create a form to ask people for feedback, to know what is useful for them, how they would evaluate training, what questions they still have. In case of this training, we also had the program quality director participating, and she really loved it, so we might even repeat it again. So this was an example from organizational level. There could be also team level, of course, but I want to give you an example, like personal example. Maybe you want to learn a new skill for your professional life. Maybe you want to become a programmer or a designer or move to my field. It could also be like there are not enough people who are good at meta learning and learning processes. We need to have more. That's why I'm also here on this channel. So yes, so let's give a personal example. How I'm using ADDIE to embark on my own learning journeys. I'm gonna go for Portuguese because this is the one that I started last year and I dropped it and now I picked it up recently again. So what was my analysis? My analysis was very simple. It's my personal life, so I don't need to be so formal. It's like I wanted to learn Portuguese because I wanted to have a new challenge, learn a new language, and I wanted to visit Portugal. And whenever I want to explore a new country, I really love connecting with locals and understanding a little bit of the background. And for me, the background and the culture is very strongly connected to the language on the one hand and history on the other one. So I try to get some basic information from both in order to really be able to immerse myself in this new different culture. And this is my analysis. That's what I wanted to do. My goals, like my situation was I didn't speak any Portuguese, and my goal was that I'm gonna be able to order coffee when I visit Portugal and maybe understand the basics. So notice it's not my goal to move to Portugal and settle there, because if this was my goal, I would have followed with the next steps in a totally different way. It's not my goal at the moment. Who knows how life will develop, but right now it's not. So that's the analysis. Then I moved to design, and this is where I'm looking for different options. I could sign up for the language course, I could do a course with Duolingo. I could buy a book and start learning it. I could ask a work colleague who's Portuguese to help me learn the language. There are many, many options. And design means looking at all these options, trying them out, and evaluating them. I know that some people, when they learn, they buy a course, they start it, then the course is super dull, it doesn't work for them, they are disappointed, but they just want to go for the course because they feel like they already paid for it and they need to make the good use out of the money. Make a good use out of your time and attention. So if this is the case, just screw this course and find something else, something that serves you better. You have a full permission from me to do it. And if you want me to evaluate some courses, you can also drop a link and I will have a look in my spare time and tell you the elements that I like and the elements that I would have improved. That's the design. So you're looking for different options. Of course, as a person who wanted to learn Portuguese, I also wanted to look for different options. And then D is the development. You finally decided how, what, and so on. For me, it was very simple. My situation is that I'm working full time. I'm involved with Toastmasters. I have overcommitments. I am not gonna add another big important thing to my plate. So I didn't want to commit to a course at the moment, especially since the need is more like a hobby. It's not something I really need to survive or really need to excel at my job. It's some additional skill that I think it's nice to have for my own personal goal. So for this reason, I decided to just follow with Duolingo. They have a good structure, they have small learnings, and they have very good repetition system. So for me, these are the three elements that I thought this is good enough for now. I know that with Duolingo I can get to a B1 level probably, and this is perfectly fine for my needs. I don't want to write an essay in in Portuguese. If yes, probably I would have just signed up to study language and culture, Portuguese language and culture at university in Portugal, if this was my goal. So this is the D for the development, and I is implementation. So of course, once you decide, if you select a course, you apply for the course, and then you do the course. For me, I had the goal to complete the whole Duolingo course in Portuguese before I visit Portugal. However, some other things changed and developed, and I had the chance and the pleasure to visit it last year with my work colleagues, which was also a fun team building. And I didn't order my coffee in Portuguese, but I could understand some songs and some basic expressions. I dropped the Portuguese after that because I focused on different stuff. I started a team coaching course, but now I am able to pick it up again slowly. So that's what I'm doing, and that's the implementation. Evaluation is, of course, evaluating where I am with this analysis. And this is why I like Duolingo, because evaluation is already part of the app. I don't really need to think much. It constantly gives me feedback, what I did, how much I did, where I made the mistakes, I can review them, and so on. So this is really working nicely for me. And as for my own evaluation, my own goal, of course, I will evaluate if I will be able to go to Portugal, order my coffee in Portuguese, or actually ask for directions. And this is something that I'm gonna try when I'm in Portugal again next year. So this is how you can design your own process. Maybe I could give you one more skill because I still have some time, but I'm gonna just get a sip of water. So this is how I apply ADDIE to my own learning in a way. Um, One thing to keep in mind is really that it's not enough to follow it from A to E step by step. You really should start thinking about E when you're at A. So take a more agile approach to it. Also, the steps in between are gonna impact each other. So it's very tempting to just follow from top to bottom, especially if you delegate one of the steps like D and I. For example, in the corporations, you might have somebody who, not even in corporations, I'm just speaking, I'm biased by my own experiences, but you might be in charge of a part of a process and another person will be in charge of the next step. I really like to develop different skill sets in order to be able to manage the whole ADDIE, if I can call it this way, because that gives me much more flexibility in understanding in what the next step will require or what I could adapt in the previous step based on the next one. So this is ADDIE. You learned today a new model to think about learning, learning design, and maybe your own learning and development, your own mastery journeys. Maybe try to apply it to one of the skills that you would like to learn, and then let me know if you have any questions. That would be much, much better. Next Friday, I'm gonna share some more insights into learning design. Maybe I can share something about how to formulate good learning objectives and how to do the evaluation part better. So I'm gonna share my learnings on A and E. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Take care. See you next Friday.